I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to grip the pharmacy counter to steady myself. The fluorescent lights above seemed too bright, the air too thick. My heart was hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" I whispered to the young woman behind the counter, even though I'd heard her perfectly the first time. She glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "Mrs. Patterson, I probably shouldn't have said anything, but I just think you should know. Your daughter-in-law was here yesterday picking up her prescription, and I noticed she used her insurance card. It's one of those platinum corporate plans, the really expensive ones. My cousin works for the same company, and she says the benefits are incredible." The floor felt like it was tilting beneath my feet. Melissa, my son Thomas's wife? The woman who'd been telling us for the past year that she was barely scraping by as a freelance consultant? The woman who'd asked Thomas for money at least twice a month because her business expenses were crushing her? "Are you absolutely certain it was her?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. This pharmacy was 3 blocks from my house in suburban Portland. Melissa lived on the other side of town, near downtown. Why would she come all the way here unless she was deliberately avoiding questions? "I'm positive, Mrs. Patterson. I've seen her here a few times now. She's hard to miss with that beautiful red hair." The technician, whose name tag read Jennifer, bit her lip. "I probably overstepped. I just remembered you mentioning at book club last month how worried you were about Thomas helping her financially, and I thought you should know." I forced myself to smile and thank her, then somehow managed to walk out of the pharmacy without my legs giving out completely. In my car, I sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours but was probably only 5 minutes. Was it possible? Could the woman my son had married, the woman who'd seemed so sweet and vulnerable when they'd met 2 years ago, actually be lying to us? Or was this just a misunderstanding? Maybe Jennifer had confused Melissa with someone else. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. But deep down, in that place where mothers know things they wish they didn't, I felt the cold certainty settling into my bones. Something was very, very wrong. My phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. "Mom, can you lend me $800? Melissa's laptop died and she needs it for work. I'm a bit short this month." My stomach turned. This was the 4th time in 2 months he'd asked to borrow money for Melissa's emergencies. The web design software she needed, the home office furniture because her back was hurting, the professional camera for her client presentations. I had exactly $1,247 in my checking account. My librarian's pension wasn't generous, but it was steady, and I'd always helped my son when he needed it. But now, staring at that text message, I felt something shift inside me. I needed to know the truth. That evening, I couldn't eat dinner. I pushed my chicken and vegetables around my plate, my mind racing through possibilities. Thomas had moved out 5 years ago when he got his software developer job at a tech startup downtown. He and Melissa had gotten married last year in a small ceremony, and they'd rented an apartment in the Pearl District. A nice place, but nothing extravagant. Thomas had told me they were saving for a house, that they were being careful with money, especially since Melissa's freelance income was unpredictable. But if Melissa had a corporate job with platinum insurance, why would she need Thomas's money? Why would she lie? I thought back over the past year, searching for clues I might have missed. Melissa rarely came to family dinners, always claiming she was working on a project or had a deadline. When she did come, she dressed casually, nothing fancy. She drove a modest Honda Civic. She talked about how stressful it was to hustle for clients, how she was always worried about the next paycheck. Had I been blind? Or had she simply been that good at playing a role? By 9 o'clock that night, I'd made a decision. I needed to see for myself. I needed evidence, not speculation. I pulled out my laptop and opened Facebook. Melissa's profile was set to private, but I could see her profile picture, a professional headshot against a corporate blue background, not the kind of photo a struggling freelancer would use. The kind of photo you'd use for a company directory. I created a new Facebook account under a fake name and sent her a friend request, along with several of her friends. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but I needed answers. My son's financial future, his happiness, maybe even his entire life was at stake. The next morning, Wednesday, I called Thomas. "Honey, I'm going to transfer you that $800, but I need to ask you something. How often does Melissa need financial help? There was a pause. Mom, I don't really want to get into this. She's having a rough time building her business. I'm just trying to support my wife. Thomas, in the past 6 months, how much have you given her? Another pause. Longer this time. I don't know exactly. Maybe $5,000? Maybe a little more. But that's what marriage is, Mom. You help each other. $5,000. My chest tightened. Does she contribute to rent? To bills? She pays what she can. Look, Mom, I really need to get back to work. Can you just send the money? After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone. $5,000 in 6 months. Probably more. And Thomas was making good money, but not so much that he could afford to support 2 people comfortably. That's why he'd started asking me for loans. I transferred the $800. But I also made another decision. I was going to find out exactly what Melissa was hiding. That afternoon I drove to the Pearl District, to the building where Thomas and Melissa lived. I parked across the street with a clear view of the entrance. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad detective movie, but I didn't know what else to do. I'd brought a book to make it look like I was just reading in my car, waiting for someone. At 4:30 p.m., I saw her. Melissa emerged from the building wearing a navy blue business suit and heels, carrying a leather briefcase. Her hair was styled professionally, her makeup perfect. She looked nothing like the casual, stressed freelancer I'd seen at family dinners. She looked like an executive. She walked 3 blocks to a parking garage and got into a car. Not the Honda Civic. A silver Audi A4, probably 2 or 3 years old but still easily worth $35,000. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I followed her, keeping a safe distance. She drove downtown and pulled into the parking lot of a gleaming glass office building. The sign out front read Bridgeport Financial Solutions. She walked in through the main entrance like she'd done it 1,000 times. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, my mind reeling. Then I did something I'd never imagined myself doing. I walked into that building. The lobby was all polished marble and modern art. A directory on the wall listed company names and floor numbers. Bridgeport Financial Solutions occupied the entire 8th floor. I took the elevator up. The 8th floor reception area was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River, sleek furniture, that careful corporate aesthetic that screamed money. A young receptionist looked up and smiled. "Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment?" "Actually, I was hoping to speak with someone about your company," I said, improvising. "My daughter is interested in a career in finance, and I wanted to learn more about the kind of opportunities you offer." The receptionist's smile widened. "Of course. Let me get you some information." She handed me a glossy brochure. "We're actually hiring right now for several positions. Is your daughter experienced in financial consulting?" "She's exploring options," I said vaguely, flipping through the brochure. And there, on page 4, in a section labeled Our Team Leaders, was a photo. Melissa Patterson, Senior Financial Analyst. Senior. Financial. Analyst. Not freelance consultant. Not struggling entrepreneur. Senior Financial Analyst at what the brochure proudly announced was one of the Pacific Northwest's fastest-growing financial firms. "Is Melissa Patterson in today?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've heard wonderful things about her." "Oh, Melissa. Yes, she's here, but she's in meetings all afternoon. Would you like to schedule a time to speak with her?" "No, that's all right. Thank you for your help." I practically fled the building. In my car, I sat shaking. Senior Financial Analyst. That wasn't an entry-level position. That was years of experience. Probably a 6-figure salary. Definitely benefits. Definitely that platinum insurance card Jennifer had mentioned. And she'd been lying to Thomas, to all of us, for over a year, taking his money, claiming she was struggling, while she secretly maintained a high-paying corporate career. But why? What could possibly motivate someone to deceive their own husband like this? Over the next 3 days, I became someone I didn't recognize. I checked Melissa's LinkedIn profile using a fake account. Sure enough, Melissa Patterson, Senior Financial Analyst at Bridgeport Financial Solutions, 6 years of experience, MBA from Portland State University. Her profile picture was professional, confident. Nothing about freelancing, Nothing about uncertainty. I sat outside their apartment building again Thursday evening and watched her arrive home at 6:45 p.m. in the Audi. She parked in the building's garage, then emerged 15 minutes later in jeans and a sweater, carrying a laptop bag that looked worn and inexpensive. She got into the Honda Civic and drove away. I followed her to a Starbucks, where she sat for an hour working on the laptop. Through the window, I could see her occasionally glancing at her phone, typing, looking stressed. Playing the role. Friday morning, I drove back to Bridgeport Financial Solutions. I knew I was probably crossing lines, invading privacy, being the kind of mother-in-law that everyone complained about. But I couldn't stop. I needed to know the full truth. I watched employees arriving for work between 8 and 9 a.m. Melissa arrived at 8:15, still in her business suit, still carrying her briefcase. She stopped in the lobby to chat with a colleague, laughing at something he said. She looked happy, confident, successful. At 11 a.m., I went back inside. This time, I asked the receptionist if I could speak with someone in human resources about career opportunities. She directed me to the third floor. The HR office was smaller, more casual. A middle-aged woman named Susan greeted me warmly. I told her the same story about my daughter being interested in finance careers. "Does your daughter have any experience in financial analysis?" Susan asked. "She's considering going back to school for it," I said. "Actually, I was impressed by Melissa Patterson's profile. How long has she been with the company?" Susan beamed. "Oh, Melissa. She's been with us for almost 7 years now. Started right out of grad school. She's one of our rising stars. Just got promoted to senior analyst last year." 7 years. Promoted last year. This wasn't some recent career change. This was Melissa's real life. The freelancing was the lie. "That's wonderful," I managed. "What kind of salary range could someone in her position expect?" Susan laughed. "Well, I can't give you exact figures, but senior analysts here typically make between $95,000 and $120,000 plus bonuses and full benefits. We're very competitive." I thanked her and left before I could break down completely. In my car, I did the math. If Melissa was making around $100,000 a year, and Thomas was making approximately $85,000, they should have been comfortable. More than comfortable. They should have been saving aggressively for their house. Instead, Thomas was constantly broke, borrowing money from his mother, struggling to cover his wife's supposed expenses. Where was Melissa's money going? That evening, I finally called Thomas. "Honey, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come over tomorrow? Please, it's urgent." "Mom, is everything okay? Are you sick?" "I'm fine, but I need to show you something. It's about Melissa." There was a long silence. "What about Melissa?" "Please, Thomas, just come over tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, trust me." Saturday morning, I woke at dawn, my stomach in knots. I'd printed everything I'd found. Screenshots of Melissa's LinkedIn profile, photos I'd taken of her entering the Bridgeport Financial Building, the company brochure with her photo and title, even a photo of her Audi parked in the garage. I made coffee and waited. At exactly 10 o'clock, Thomas's car pulled into my driveway. He looked worried as he walked up the path. "Mom, what's going on? You sounded really strange on the phone." I hugged him, then led him to the kitchen table where I'd laid out all the evidence. "Sit down, honey. I need to show you something, and I need you to keep an open mind." "This is about Melissa?" He looked confused and defensive already. "Mom, if this is about the money, I told you." "Thomas, please, just look." I walked him through everything. The pharmacy technician's comment, the LinkedIn profile, the Bridgeport Financial Building, the Audi, the business suits, the HR conversation about her salary. With each piece of evidence, I watched his face change. Confusion gave way to disbelief, then to something harder to watch, the dawning realization that he'd been deceived by the person he trusted most. "There has to be an explanation," he said finally, but his voice was hollow. "Maybe she just started this job. Maybe she was embarrassed to tell me because she'd been saying she was freelancing. Thomas, she's been there for 7 years. She was promoted to senior analyst a year ago, right before you got married." He stared at the LinkedIn screenshot. 7 years? She's been lying to you since the beginning, maybe even before you met." His hands were shaking. "But why? Why would she lie about this? If she had a good job, a good salary, why would she pretend to struggle? Why would she take money from me? I don't know, honey, but I think you need to ask her. He left without another word, taking the folder of evidence with him. I spent the rest of the day pacing my house, checking my phone every 5 minutes, terrified that I'd destroyed my son's marriage, that he'd hate me for interfering. At 8 o'clock that evening, my doorbell rang. Thomas stood on my porch, and I could tell he'd been crying. My heart broke. "Tell me everything," I said, pulling him inside. We sat on the couch, and he told me what had happened. He'd gone home and confronted Melissa with the evidence. At first, she denied everything, claimed I was lying, that I'd fabricated it all because I never liked her. But when he showed her the photos, the LinkedIn profile, the company brochure, she'd finally broken down. "She admitted it all," Thomas said, his voice rough. "She's been working there the whole time we've known each other. She makes $110,000 a year. She has her own savings account with over $80,000 in it." "Oh, Thomas." "She said she lied because she wanted to test me. She wanted to know if I'd love her even if she wasn't financially stable. She wanted to see if I was the kind of man who would support his wife through hard times." He laughed bitterly. "She made me take on extra freelance projects to cover her fake expenses. I've been eating ramen for dinner 3 nights a week while she had $80,000 sitting in a secret bank account." "What about the money you gave her? The $5,000? "More than that. Closer to $8,000 total. She said she was saving it for us, for the house we're supposedly planning to buy together. But she kept it in her account, not a joint account. She said she was going to surprise me with it eventually, show me that she'd been responsible with money all along." "That's not love, Thomas. That's manipulation." "I know." He covered his face with his hands. "God, Mom, I've been such an idiot. Everyone must think I'm the dumbest person alive." "You're not an idiot. You trusted your wife. That's what you're supposed to do in a marriage. But I should have seen it. The signs were there. She never let me see her financial records. She always paid her share of rent in cash, said she didn't trust banks with her irregular income. She never wanted me to come to her home office because she was embarrassed by how shabby it was." He shook his head. "It was all lies." We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, I asked the question I'd been dreading. "What are you going to do?" I told her I need time to think, but honestly, Mom, I don't know how to come back from this. She didn't just lie about one thing. She lied about her entire life. About who she is. How do you build a marriage on that? "You can't," I said gently. He stayed at my house that night, sleeping in his old bedroom. Over the next week, I watched my son grapple with the kind of heartbreak I'd hoped he'd never experience. He moved his clothes and essential belongings to my house while he and Melissa took space to figure things out. But the more Thomas learned, the worse it got. He discovered that Melissa had been using her real corporate credit card to buy expensive lunches and clothes, then claiming to him that a client had treated her or that she'd gotten things on sale. He found out that her business trips were actually team-building retreats and conferences that her company paid for, not desperate attempts to land clients. The woman he'd married didn't exist. She'd been a carefully constructed fiction. 3 weeks after my initial confrontation with Thomas, he filed for divorce. Melissa tried to fight it at first, offering to pay back all the money, promising she'd never lie again. But Thomas's trust was shattered beyond repair. I asked her one question, he told me over coffee at my kitchen table. I asked her what else she'd lied about, and she couldn't give me a straight answer. She said she'd exaggerated some things and left out some details. I realized I don't even know who I married. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Melissa had to split their shared assets and pay Thomas back the $8,000 she'd taken from him. She moved to Seattle for a new job, and I never saw her again. Thomas stayed with me for 3 months while he found a new apartment and rebuilt his savings. We had a lot of long conversations during that time, about trust, about red flags, about the difference between being supportive and being taken advantage of. I kept thinking about what she said, Thomas told me one evening, about testing me, as if love is some kind of examination you pass or fail. Real love doesn't test, it doesn't deceive. It doesn't manipulate. No, it doesn't, I agreed. And the crazy thing is, if she'd just been honest from the beginning, I would have been thrilled. I would have loved being with someone financially stable and successful. We could have been saving together, building something real together. Instead, she created this elaborate lie that poisoned everything. A year later, Thomas is doing well. He met someone new, a fellow software developer named Jenna, who's refreshingly straightforward about her life, her finances, and her goals. They're taking things slowly, building trust brick by brick, and this time, Thomas knows what real partnership looks like. As for me, I learned something too. I learned that sometimes mothers do know best, not because we're smarter or wiser, but because we're watching from a different angle. We see things our children can't see because they're too close, too in love, too trusting. I also learned that protecting your child doesn't end when they turn 18 or move out or get married. Sometimes protection means asking hard questions. Sometimes it means doing uncomfortable detective work. Sometimes it means showing them painful truths they don't want to see. Jennifer, the pharmacy technician, still works at the same location. Every time I pick up my prescriptions, she gives me a knowing smile, and I thank her silently for having the courage to speak up. She didn't have to tell me what she'd seen. She could have minded her own business. But she didn't, and because of that, my son escaped a marriage built on lies before he'd invested even more years and money into it. That's why I decided to share this story. Because somewhere out there might be another mother who's feeling that cold certainty in her bones, that sense that something isn't right with her child's relationship. There might be another parent who's being told they're overreacting, being controlling, refusing to let their child live their own life. To those parents, I say this: trust your instincts, ask questions, look for evidence. Yes, your adult children need independence and space to make their own mistakes. But if something feels wrong, if the pieces don't fit together, if you're seeing signs of manipulation or deception, you have not just the right but the responsibility to investigate. Not because you want to control their lives, but because you love them. And sometimes, love means being willing to be uncomfortable, unpopular, even hated for a while, in order to protect the people who matter most. My son once told me that he wishes he'd listened to his gut earlier, that he'd asked more questions instead of accepting Melissa's explanations at face value. He said that on some level he'd known something was off, but he'd ignored those feelings because he didn't want to seem suspicious or untrusting. But trust has to be earned, and it has to be based on truth. And when someone is lying about their fundamental identity, about their entire professional life, about their financial situation, that's not a small deception. That's a red flag the size of Texas. I think about Melissa sometimes and wonder why she did it. Was it really about testing Thomas, or was it about control? Was it about power? Was it some kind of psychological game that made her feel clever? I'll never know. But I do know that her lies cost her a good man who would have loved her genuinely if she'd just let him see who she really was. Thomas is getting married next spring. Jenna is everything Melissa pretended to be: honest, transparent, communicative. They're saving for a house together, both contributing equally, both excited about their shared future. Sometimes Thomas jokes that he should thank Melissa for showing him what he didn't want in a partner. But I see the shadow that crosses his face sometimes, the hesitation before he fully trusts, the way he double-checks things now that he never would have questioned before. That's the real cost of deception. It doesn't just end when the lies are revealed. It lingers, making you question everything, doubt everyone. That's what I want people to understand. When you lie to someone you claim to love, especially about something as fundamental as your identity and your intentions, you're not just deceiving them in that moment. You're teaching them not to trust. You're planting seeds of doubt that will grow long after you're gone. And for parents watching their children navigate relationships, remember this: your job isn't to control or manage their lives, but it is to watch, to listen, to ask questions when things don't add up. It is to investigate when your instincts scream that something is wrong. It is to present evidence calmly and let your adult children make their own choices. I didn't force Thomas to leave Melissa. I just showed him the truth and let him decide what to do with it. That's all any parent can do. But sometimes, that's everything.